to you.
Thank you, Nisha. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasant duty to Ladies and gentlemen, this is my pleasant duty to introduce Sharat Sabharwal. When I was Secretary Commerce, during my entire stay in Commerce Ministry, he was Pakistan's High Commissioner of India to Pakistan. And we worked quite closely on India-Pakistan trade normalization. Mr. Sharat Sabharwal comes from he entered the Foreign Service of India in the same year that I did. There is another similarity that he comes from the city of Jalandhar, and my parents were also from the city of Jalandhar. And also Rahul Khullar, who was my counterpart, Secretary of Commerce in India, he also joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1975. So in a way, we three were batchmates, two from India and one from Pakistan. And when Mr. Rahul Khullar for the first time came to Pakistan to start the 5th round of negotiations, it was Mr. Sharat Sabharwal who introduced me to Mr. Rahul, and his introduction, I remember, was in a way kick-started the process, and we hit upon very well and started the discussion on where to take this process forward even before the negotiations had begun. Mr. Sharat Sabharwal has remained in Pakistan on two occasions, once from 1995 to 1999. He saw the highs and lows of relationship between the two countries. He was there when Mr. Vajpayee traveled by bus, crossed over to Wagah, and spent some 2 good days in Lahore. And he was also there when this dream became sour by the Kargil war. He was also there when Mumbai attacks happened. He was also there when the composite dialogue started. And he was there, as I told you earlier, when me and Khullar were taking this process forward to new dimensions. Mr. Sharat Sabharwal has a keen sense of humor, and I can recall one incident when the Pakistan cabinet announced that in principle they would grant the MFN status to India. Mr. Sharat Sabharwal started getting some negative signals. He immediately rang up Makhdoom Amin Fahim, Pakistan's Commerce Minister, who in turn rang me up. I was in Karachi. He said, please come over by the evening. Sharat Sabharwal is very upset that this decision is not getting implemented. So I went to him. When I rang him up from the airport, he came to my office. We had a good discussion. I told him that I will be on Pakistan television news for 1-hour program. He can record it and send it to India, or ask them to watch, if they can, Pakistan television news, and we will be very clear-cut making the statement that Pakistan has in principle granted the MFN status to India. While we were discussing this, he said that in the press conference your minister said something which I must bring to your notice. मैंने पूछा वो क्या? कह लगे हमें तो जफर साहब ये मोस्ट फेवर्ड नेशन ही हजम नहीं हो रहा था, उन्होंने कहा मोस्ट फेवरेट नेशन. So we enjoyed our times there, and ladies and gentlemen, it would be a pleasure for you to listen to him. Thank you.
Thank you. I can do it. Well, thank you very much, Zafar. Thank you for those very kind words of introduction. It's indeed a pleasure to come here and speak to this second annual conference on normalization of trade between India and Pakistan, organized by ICRIER. The organization, as you know, has done important work in this area, which I believe is an extremely important aspect of relationship between the two countries. Now, I have been given a very difficult task. The task is to give you some food for thought before you move to a very sumptuous meal, which I saw is being served outside. So I only hope that I can compete with that meal, but I'll try and speak a little bit of my own experience of this process, recall some of the stages in this process, and then come to a concern that I have now that I see this process as an outsider. My first impression, my 4 years plus as High Commissioner in Pakistan from April 2009, this is soon after the Mumbai incident, within months of, and I wasn't there when that happened. And I was there till June 13. The first impression was the sheer degree of enthusiasm that I saw on consolidation of trade ties between the two countries amongst the business community in Pakistan. This was evident right through in two ways to me. One, when I arrived there, the visa regulations were somewhat difficult those days. The liberalization came later on. But there were continuous keenness to send very large delegations to trade events in India. And I received those requests from various chambers and so on. And despite those restrictions, we managed to send very large delegations to a number of trade events. If you see the visits of the ministers from both sides during my tenure, whether it was visits of Makhdoom Amin Fahim to India or Mr. Anand Sharma's visit to Pakistan, they were accompanied on all those occasions by very large business delegations. And I'm not talking here of any number of business meets that took place aside from those visits. Somebody mentioned here Aman Ki Asha. I'm not going into the details of that initiative, but let me say that during the conference which was organized by Aman Ki Asha in Lahore in May 2012, we had almost 100 plus top business houses and business establishments represented in that conference, and an equal or a larger number from the Pakistani side. During my tenure, I had invitations from all major chambers of commerce from across Pakistan. I visited Islamabad Chamber, Karachi, Lahore, FPCCI, of course, the Apex Chamber, Faisalabad, Sialkot, Gujarat, some of them on more than one occasions. Karachi and Lahore, I think I visited 4 times each of those chambers, talking to businessmen. And one thing, as I said earlier, that was clear to me was the degree of enthusiasm for promoting trade and commercial relations between the two countries. Now, that is not to say that there were some reservations here and there, which I'll come to a little later. The dialogue initially, and I found, if I may say so, use that expression, I thought it was a dialogue of the deaf. Initially, because my standard demand was give us MFN status. That is our due under WTO regulations. And from the other side, amongst other things, the issue of non-tariff barriers was raised. And this carried on for some time. Then I started asking my friends in these chambers, let's come down to some specifics. What are the major difficulties? And it took some time, but thereafter the initiative was taken by the Ministry of Commerce under my friend Zafar Mahmood to carry out a survey, to send out a questionnaire to various chambers. And as I recall, they came up with 3 areas. One was laboratory testing. They said, you send our products deep inside India for testing and so on. It takes very long. The other was customs difficulties, which some of the exporters had experienced. And the third was, if there was a grievance, there should be a mechanism to redress it. And I was happy that later on, all these 3 issues became the subject of agreements, which were signed in September 2012. Now, while all this was going on, my dialogue was going on. I used to read in newspapers statements by one Zafar Mahmood, whom I hadn't met till then. Statements also voicing some of the concerns of the Pakistani business community, but the underlying message, I must say, despite all those varying demands from both sides, the underlying message that I got from my meetings in chambers and from the messages that I read from the Commerce Secretary in the Pakistani press, in the Pakistani media, was a keen desire to see relationship grow in the economic and commercial arena. So then we came to April 2011, and I regard it as an extremely important initiative. The meeting between the Commerce Secretaries, which launched the process which is now continuing. I mean, it laid the foundation of the process which is now continuing. A number of important decisions were taken then, and I must thank you, Zafar, for all that you did for this process. I saw him visiting various chambers of commerce, trying to listen to their difficulties, trying to explain the advantages of improved trade relations with India. So, trying to bring the two sides together. And it wasn't without a reason that a very influential politician of Pakistan told me in 2012, and he said Zafar Mahmood is a powerhouse, and I have seen him performing that role. But anyway, that meeting then paved the way for a process, an important process, which started at that stage. And that process, I must say, and this is how I think things should be done, was one step by Pakistan, another step by India, or vice versa, and so on. So it's a series of steps, one by one side, and another by the other side, etc., etc. So what was the first step? And this is something which you used to tell me. We had some reservations on some concessions that the EU had announced for Pakistani exporters after the devastating floods of 2010. We lifted those reservations. Then Pakistan took the in-principle decision to give MFN status to India, and that's the incident which you were narrating when the Honorable Minister of Information of Pakistan somehow described it during our TV conference, media conference, as most favorite nation. I think Pakistan also decided at that stage that as an interim measure, they would go from a positive list in the matter of imports from India to a negative list. Then the next step was reduction of the SAFTA sensitive list by both sides. Pakistan did it, we did it. The next step was Pakistan in February 2012 moving from a positive list of about 2,000 items to a negative list of about 1,209, if I remember the number correctly. That important decision was taken. And then we had the meeting of Commerce Secretaries which took place in September 2012. And what were the decisions? I need to recall because I need to link that up with the little concern I have, which I'll talk to you about at the end. The decisions were that once Pakistan had transitioned to a non-discriminatory trade status for India, then India would reduce its SAFTA sensitive list to 100 items. And if I remember the words correctly, it said something to the effect, reduce the list to 100 items, taking into account Pakistan's export interests. And then it said that Pakistan will reduce its SAFTA sensitive list to 100 items over a period of 5 years. So you had a step-by-step approach, again, one step by one side, another by the other.